If I were to take all my outtakes of doing this video, I'd probably be uploading an hour-long video. Not sure why and not sure what the problem is, but let me tell you something. I think the biggest problem is, and why I'm talking about this at the beginning of the video, is there's just so much going on with this Ball Engineer Hydrocarbon DeepQuest II that I'm afraid I'm going to miss it, or that you guys are going to be like, oh, you didn't mention this, or what about this? Well, let me tell you something. Whatever I miss here, you can always ask a question down in the comment section below. But also, there's going to be a full review at Watchreport.com, and the link to that will be in the description. Also, welcome and hello. This is the Ball Engineer Hydrocarbon DeepQuest II review. Thank you for joining us here at Watchreport.com. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it is at Watchreport. Now, as I said, all seriousness, there is just so much going on with this watch. It is a titanium case. It's made out of solid block of titanium. It has a titanium and stainless steel bracelet. This is Ball, so they are known for their tritium tubes, and this is the second DeepQuest, and let me tell you, they have improved in many ways from the original version to this one. I'm going to put a picture of that one up on the screen here. You can see not only the way the crown guards were done, but this dial is definitely more elaborate than the first one, and that is because Ball has started making and taking those tritium tubes and making numerals out of them on the dial. Also, the rectangular markers of these tritium tubes are much larger on this version than they were on the previous version, and they actually sit about 1 millimeter high. So overall, this dial is much more in your face than the previous one, and I also think a much better looking watch. So let me go ahead and give you all the specifications. You're looking at a price of $3,899. Well, what is that going to get you? Well, that gets you a 42 millimeter titanium case, 1,000 meters water resistant. Of course, it has a sapphire crystal. It is a COS certified movement. Now, it is a top ETA 2982 movement, and I'm not sure why, but they went ahead and labeled it as the Ball RR1101-C. That's a hell of a, that's just a long name for a movement. Anyways, let me get back to the specifications. 42 millimeter case, 53 millimeter lug to lug, 15.5 millimeters thick. The bracelet starts out 21 millimeters at the lugs, tapers to 19, and then back to 21 millimeters for the clasp. It is extremely anti-magnetic, extremely shock resistant. I'll give you the actual numbers of that at the full review at Watchreport.com. And you have super luminova on the bezel, and then that whole dial is tritium tubes. As a matter of fact, 24 tritium tubes. Now, where do I want to start with this watch? Okay, one of the first things that I'm going to talk about here is those tritium tubes. And if you're not familiar with tritium tubes, go ahead, look it up. You can Google it, but they don't need a light source to glow. And, you know, a lot of companies use tritium tubes, Luminox probably being the most other prominent one. But with Ball, they do it to a much bigger level. And as you can see here, you could really see those Arabic numerals and those large rectangle indices. But one of the things, yes, that's going to glow a lot more in the dark. But one of the things when you make these those tritium tubes that big is you could see those plastic covers for them. The covers is the wrong word. And see, this is what happens. There's so much that I want to talk about here. I'm getting tongue-tied. But the tritium tubes are encapsulated in plastic. And what I'm basically trying to say here is the larger you make it, the more noticeable that plastic is on the dial. So the next thing that I want to discuss here is that bezel. And there's a lot actually going on here with that bezel. One of the things is that it reminds me of the Swiss Army Dive Master. You can see from the 0 and 20, it is not only raised, but it is a different finish. It is more of a blasted finish, where the rest of the bezel is circular brushed titanium. Although you can see this one has rider tabs, and you can see on the sides of the bezel, you have those Torx or star screws holding everything in as well. So it does remind me of like a cross between, like say, a Breitling Seawolf and a Swiss Army Dive Master. One thing though that I do want to point out, the bezel is of course very large, very easy to grip, and it functions very, very well, but it almost has like a cheap, hollow feeling to it. And you know, that I hate to say that about a watch that costs $4,000, but that's what's going on here. How do I want to talk about it? If you think about when you get in a car and you have a really nice looking gear shift lever, but then you go ahead and you go to put it into gear and just feels, you know, feels kind of cheap and plasticky. That's kind of what it feels like with this bezel. It's hard for me to convey a feeling when, you know, you can only see me turning it here on video, and it's hard for me to really show that, but that's what it feels like to me. Also, another thing I want to point out is that on the original promotional video for this watch, the same screws that were in that bezel were in the lug holes here. And that is not the case, at least on my model. They have flathead screw heads here in the drilled lugs. And I'm not a big fan of that because mostly, you know, when you're applying pressure, flathead screws can get stripped easily. I would have preferred to have seen those Torx screws used in the lug holes as well. Moving on to the crown, you have a patented helium release valve system in the crown. Now, I'm not a diver, I'm not a saturation diver, I'm never going to need that helium release valve. But instead of it being on the side of the case, instead of it just being a manual crown and extra crown, it is built in, it is patented and built in to that large, massive crown. And I have to say, that is just cool. When it comes to actual crown functionality, it is huge, it is extremely easy to grip, and honestly, it feels just like butter. One of the smoothest crown operations that I have used in quite some time. Now, as I said, the bracelet is titanium and stainless steel, and that makes this watch a little heavier than if it was all titanium. It's 210 grams. And I'm not sure why they decided to go ahead and do the stainless steel and titanium. You can see that the stainless steel is the center section of the H-Link bracelet. I like the look of it, but you can notice the difference of the tone of the titanium and the stainless steel. But the positives of the bracelet are, one, it has not one, not two, not three, but 4 half links. And then when you get to this clasp, you're like, wait a minute, why does this have a deployant clasp? Well, it is a deployant clasp, but it functions as a dive clasp. So you have those big, chunky, rectangle push buttons. Once you open that up, you can see you have 2 micro adjust holes on each side of the clasp, and then you also have dive extensions on each side as well. So they could have just went with a more standard, you know, dive buckle, but for some reason they went very elaborate, but it really does work and function very well. When you flip it over, you can see that nice solid embossed case back. A lot of information going on there that you would expect on a case back and with a watch that has so much going on like this, but very nice looking case back. Of course, it's not going to be an exhibition case back with a 1,000-meter water resistant watch such as this. This is more of that tool dive style watch, and you're going to get a nice case back. The lume, as I said, it's tritium. So tritium, you can really only capture the full brightness of tritium in the dark. Now, I went ahead and I played a little bit with my studio lights and did a little lapse time deal here on video, so I could try and capture the superluminova and the tritium working as best as I can. But obviously in a pitch, you know, black room, this is what the tritium is going to look like, and the tritium is going to be much brighter in the dark room, the pitch black room, than it will be if you just went outside and you came back in. You know, the bezel is going to glow because that's superluminova, but you're not really going to see that tritium glow. Overall, this is an amazing watch. Now, I have to say, It's a large watch, but it's not a large watch, and that gets a little confusing, but on my 7.5-inch wrist, it does wear and feel nice, much nicer than the Breitling I had a few years ago, and that was one of the reasons I got rid of it, because it was just too large of a watch. I have to say, this style, though, is just not for me these days. It's large, it's chunky, and I don't need a 1,000-meter water-resistant watch these days, but for those that do, or for those that like this style of watch, I can obviously see the appeal and everything that's going on with this watch and everything that is built into this watch. This is just your crazy, overbuilt dive watch on every level, and it's just very, very, very cool. Now, there's also going to be a ceramic bezel model coming out soon. So if you're somebody that doesn't like I was going to call it stainless steel, but it's titanium. But if you don't like a naked bezel, if you will, there is going to be a ceramic bezel insert coming out, I want to say sometime this summer. So if you like everything else about the watch, but you don't like that bezel, or you want something that's a little more traditional looking, look out for the ceramic bezel model coming out this summer from Ball. As I said, if you want to see more about this, you're going to go down in the description, click the link to watchreport.com, check out my full review, all the specifications, and of course, all of my photography. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you on the next one.